All right, so now is time to start talking about what it means to run a creative effort as a business. And I want to take a second here to talk about time and money and the relationship between those two things because this is the central concept that you build your life on. Now, you can only do your work, do that creative effort that you're engaged in as long as you have money to fund it. Because unfortunately, rent and expenses, health insurance, food, car payments, student loans, all of that stuff is sort of banging on your back door at all times. It's chasing you down. And if you don't have capital to cover that stuff, there's almost no way to start freelancing. This is because when you start, you know, doing your own thing, you you have this initial money gap before anything starts flowing in, right? I mean, there's this time in order to create your work, that takes time. In order to sell it, that takes time. In order to monetize and have cash flowing in, either through a business paying you for your services or sort of another sort of social media, passive revenue stream, all of that takes time to set up. So it's really common for people to think of themselves as artists or as journalists, on the independent level, and they don't make that intellectual switch to realize that the money is really important, and you only have the time to work as long as you have cash or time. And you know, here's one of those really interesting things is that if you don't have cash right now, you don't have sort of you're not sitting on a fortune or something. The other way to get time to do your work is to keep your expenses really, really low. Now, a lot of people when they start out in this think that they need to be in the center of sort of the creative industries. People will move to New York or to the fancy part of their city, the arts district, and they want to be surrounded by these great influences of other great people doing cool work. And I totally get that. But here's the problem. If you're in an area where there are a lot of people who are creative and doing sort of the same thing as you, you're a small fish in sort of a big pond, and you're paying big fish prices. Uh, when I got my start, I first was in Madison, Wisconsin, this, small, pretty cool college town, but there are not a lot of freelance writers there, which allowed me to sort of have access to that bigger market or that small market, but I was sort of a bigger fish in that market than say New York City, where if I throw a stone, I'm hitting a writer for the New Yorker or a New York Times best-selling author on the head with it, sort of at random, and it's and New York's expensive and Madison was way cheaper. And my career even got a bigger jumpstart when I moved to India, which is like super cheap, right? Where I was spending in rupees but earning, few dollars. The reason this was really important though is because, I could focus on creating quality content, really put my time into something creating value that I didn't have the actual capital to fund. So keeping your expenses low is really, really important. And if you just want to go headlong into sort of this creative business without thinking about how much time you have in front of you, based on what your bank account says, you're going to be in a lot of trouble really fast because you're going to come to a point where you're negotiating a contract and someone's sitting in front of you and they say, look, we're going to give you, I don't know, $3,000, and you're like, well, that's going to cover groceries and rent. But in return, they're going to ask for things like rights that you really don't want to give up in the long term. They could take, you could rewrite an article and they have the book rights to that. So if a publisher wants to publish that article, turn it into a book for what is actually a lot more money down the road, uh, depending on the contract, you won't have that option, which is going to keep you stuck in this sort of broke phase where you're always chasing that next small payment and really undercutting your future. So as I, sort of went from a sort of very obscure freelancer to someone who is more stable, I always thought about the checks that were coming in. in terms of how much lifespan that would give me. And at the end of that lifespan, right, at the end of that, when that money ran out, I was essentially selling hairpins by the side of the road, totally broke, and, it takes guts to sort of look, like I've got, a month of money in my bank account. And I've been down to the point where I've had like 3 or 4 days of money in my bank account, not really sure how it was all going to pan out. And that is scary. And not everyone has the constitution to deal with that. And I really think you need to think hard if you can sort of make this go of it, because down the line, if you're not able to be in a position where you can say no to people, you can get into a lot of trouble, as you will see as we go further in this video. So that's what that's about. Remember, time and money are really important, and you have to think about what you're doing as a business.